welcome to this week's Omega Wave. I'm your co-host, Bill Shields. You notice we're not on video this week. Sorry about that. Had a lot going on this week, including our very own co-host, Craig Locicero, sat down with Clutch's Neil Fallon for an hour-long interview. So kick back, enjoy. Here's Craig and Neil, and we'll see you next Sunday on the Omega Wave Show, right here on SkullRecordsRadio.com.
Hey everybody, this is Craig Locicero for the Omega Wave Show, and I'm going to be sitting in for Mr. Bill Shields, who cannot make it to this interview. He's extremely pissed off, bummed out. He wants to be here to talk to Mr. Neil Fallon from Clutch, who I've been waiting to talk to for a long, long time. And I just want to say, Mr. Fallon, this is an honor, and I have a lot of good questions for you, or hopefully they're good questions. You tell me. How you doing?
Cool. Well, it's pleasure's all mine.
Well, thanks for taking the time, brother. I don't know what you're actually into right now. Are you in between cycles? Are you touring? What are you doing?
We've had quite a bit of time at home, almost, about 2.5 months when all is said and done. We have the rest of October off. We did one show last week in our beer release party, but we're kind of concentrating on trying to write as much material as we can for the next record.
Yeah, I was going to kind of ask you how you do that. I mean, I figured you guys are more of a jam band than most. When people say they jam and I hear the music, it doesn't sound like they're fucking jamming. But you guys actually sound like you go through a lot of jamming to get to where you're going.
Yeah, there's always a lot of, well, not a lot, there's tons of stuff that never sees the light of day. And the band in general, I think, kind of writes much more music than I could ever hope to write lyrics to. And, we enjoy doing it. It's not digging ditches, and I just find it easier to concentrate on doing that when we're at home.
Right. Well, you write some of the music as well, don't you? Because you play guitar. I've seen you do it a number of times.
Sure. We all kind of play our part, and when all is said and done, it's the song. Any given song, it's hard to say who wrote what because it changes so much. Because if someone writes a riff, the next guy might say, well, this riff should be a little slower or faster, and then maybe change the key, maybe the time signature. And so it's very much a creative democracy.
And you cats have been together the entire time. I mean, it's been, the core of you four as is for how many years now?
This August was 20. That
is impressive, my friend. That does not happen.
No, it's a pretty rare thing, and it doesn't feel like 20 years. I mean, it's been a lot of fun, and I think because we have a good sense of humor, and we were friends before we were a band, and this was our first band. That's made it a lot easier for us.
Yeah, I can see that. Did you guys meet in high school? Was it one of those things, or was it college, or post? Was it childhood? I'm just real curious how people stay together for 20 fucking years without killing each other.
Well, it was high school. I've known JP since junior high, and Dan lived in the same neighborhood. And, we had bands in high school, different incarnations of just like any other high school band. You make up a logo and a name before you even, write your first song.
Oh, exactly. Well, I don't know if you know this as well, but I'm in a band called Forbidden, and I have
right on.
Yeah, it's metal, and I started when I was 15 years old, and that was 85. And I could tell you, man, I needed to get away from these dudes for a long time. We're back together now, but I needed years off, and I just did the rock thing entirely. I devoted myself to that for probably about a good 10 years, and that was probably the funnest 10 years of my life.
But it's when you tour, especially when you're touring, sometimes the psychology can be tough if the chemistry's not there, and even between the best of friends, when you're up in each other's grills all the time, you do need to take breaks. I mean, when we go out on tour, no one speaks to each other for a couple of weeks, but then, before long, somebody sends out an email and say, let's get together, kick around a few riffs.
Yeah, you got to be bros if you're used to that brand or blend of fart, for all those years, because I'm sure everybody's got their own smell, just like in every band. But anyway,
yeah, you got to be able to like have water roll off your back. I mean, everybody's got their idiosyncrasies, and if you start like making a laundry list of what gets on your nerves, before you know you're on a Greyhound bus home.
Yeah, well, no doubt. I've seen that happen actually. Many times, actually. I've seen somebody get the boot many times and get sent back home. Anyway, well, let me get to the meat of the matter here. I don't know if Bill really informed you too much of what the show is about, but it's turned into a multi-tiered thing, and when I talked to him originally about doing it, we really wanted to talk to lyricists that said things that were relevant to what's really going on, and you know, something that actually has some sort of resonance with people on a subconscious level. And I figure, Neil, and I'm sure Bill told you this, but I figure you as to being the Mark Twain of our generation, and I'm sure that makes you kind of uncomfortable. But
well,
to me,
flattering. Thank you.
It is what I think you are, because I think if they put your lyrics and the music inside of a time capsule, buried it down, 100 feet, found it a few thousand years from now, I believe that they would have a great understanding of what it was that we did to ourselves. That's the way I've always seen it. Something clicked with me and your lyrics a long time ago, and you've never disappointed, and it's got the humor, to keep it carrying it through. And I think it's really important to have a sense of humor in these times, because otherwise you're just crying like a baby. It is what it is. And I just really, really respect where you're coming from.
Thank you.
Your stream of unconsciousness is pretty impressive, my friend.
Sometimes it is that.
Well, I like it. It's something about that. We won't get too much into how you write the lyrics, but more of what you're writing about. But I'm just curious, do you ever take a David Bowie stance on it? Kind of like, do you ever mix the words up, throw them into a hat, and throw them out on the table? Not exactly that, but anything of the sort? Or do you do it, are you doing it linearly from top to bottom?
Each song's different. Sometimes a song writes itself in a matter of 10 minutes. Sometimes I beat my head against the wall for months. And then you have to step away from it and come to it with a fresh mind. When I'm writing lyrics in a notebook, and it's sometimes you have a theme in your head, but it's not. You're trying to put like a square peg in a round hole, or vice versa, because sometimes the theme just isn't jiving with the rhythm of the words or the melody, and you can get so attached to a theme that you're doing self a disservice. And sometimes you have to bite the bullet and throw that away, or just maybe pick out one or two words, and instead of having that just be a passing reference in a verse, turn that into like the big payoff in a chorus. And a lot of times just taking one or two words and moving them can give you that eureka moment. It's almost like, to draw an analogy, it's like sculpting, where the song's already on the paper, just as the sculpture's just in the stone. You got to just whittle away at it, and eventually it reveals itself. It can be very frustrating, but when you get there, it's pretty satisfying.
Yeah, I think that goes for all real songwriters. They there's a million different ways to get to the same point, and I guess that a lot of us tend to get really frustrated and try to find the fast way through. And I think that sometimes you do got to go the long route. Sometimes you got to, beat your head against the wall and find that one thing. It's pretty enlightening, actually. Well, I can also say, I know that you're a pretty educated man. Didn't you actually graduate college, English major or something like that?
Yeah, I graduated from the University of Maryland in '93. Did English, and just by sheer luck, ended up in what's turned out to be a career where I actually used an English degree to my benefit.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I kind of figured that. I said, well, if you actually did take that education, apply it to something, this is probably the thing to apply it to, because like I said, hopefully it'll end up in that time capsule and somebody will find this, down the road when the digital bitch is dead.
Well, I had I was very fortunate I was able to go to school and do the band at the same time, and then I think it paid itself off in a roundabout way. It's I think just by and I probably knew this beforehand, and I have my parents to thank, is just having a love for learning things, via books or wherever you can. Because life is about learning, and sometimes, or unlearning something, and, that could be your instrument, or that could be, as simple as learning how to, grow a garden. But all these things, when you do something in the creative arts, they find themselves in there, whether you like it or not.
I think it's interesting you said unlearning too, because I do think that's really important to break the habits that we have, and so many people are so fixated on what they believe with nothing, very little wiggle room. And I think that society in general needs to unlearn a lot right now to save itself. And I'm going to get to that in a second here too. But I was going to ask you something about more recent news and kind of like what your take is on a couple things here.
Okay.
Now, right now, Wall Street is hustling and bustling and alive with protesters. And we're not seeing too much about this on the news right now. Now, I was just curious because I know you take a stand kind of just with the lyrics, but do you have any kind of, shall I say, open wound or disdain towards what we have going on here in this country with the economy, the way it's pretty much collapsing in on itself? And it seems like it's just a real setup.
Well, I guess I can answer that question in two parts. The first response is, and this can apply to a lot of these types of questions, is I tend to take a very large view or long view of history and any current event as it occurs into a larger historical context. Mm-hmm. What's occurring now, if you want to say the shit hit the fan at the end of 2007, you're talking just shy of 4 years. That's not that long. And Wall Street as an entity calling the shots for the United States and its citizens hasn't been going on very long either. The philosophy behind it's been going on for years and centuries. The reason I think a lot of people are finally just throwing their hands up in the air, whether they agree on one side of or despite what side of the political fence they're on, it's just because the economy's shit. And when that happens, that's when people start getting pissed. No one gives a damn when the economy's great. And you could see this happen over and over and over again throughout history, whether it be the Russian Revolution, the rise of the Nazis, the French Revolution. These are all precipitated by economic shitstorms when people were hungry. With Wall Street in particular, I think what really gets a lot of people's blood pressure up, as well as mine, is these people aren't actually making anything.
No.
They're just clicking mouses on a computer screen and shuffling money around in a kind of like when you're back in elementary school and two bullies played keep away with the ball.
Mm-hmm.
That's all that's going on, really, if you want to dumb it down. It's in my kind of very simplistic understanding of macroeconomics. And when people's, for example, there are people whose children are now only going to school 4 days a week because their schools can't afford to pay for 5 days a week, and then they see the very, very uber rich, I guess they're called job creators now, but you see the uber rich getting more money and then bitching about the possibility of actually pay higher taxes. This is what has classically always brought people into the streets, whether it were now or Spartacus.
Right. Well, I do agree with that, and I think that history does repeat itself, and it probably has repeated itself almost verbatim in its own way thousands of years ago, before we even dug it up. I mean, we probably haven't even dug it all up, so I do think that's true. I think that when you tie it all together with technology, though, and everything that we've done, to build into this soup, this chaotic soup that we have. I think we're just at that. What am I trying to say here? The elastic's about to break. It's about to snap back right now, the way I see it. As it does repeat itself, it's kind of gotten to that point where it's at the end of what it can be at this stage. I don't know if you agree with that, and I hate to sound like a negative fuck, but it certainly doesn't seem like people are going to be able to turn around easily and remedy this situation and get used to a life without the luxuries, the lap of luxury that we have right now, the technology that we're all addicted to.
Well, I think people's understanding of what luxury is always dependent on what they've been given to understand as luxury.
Absolutely.
And any societal change very rarely happens gradually and smoothly. It's always kind of exponential, and then there's a drop, and or some kind of change. You saw that in the American Civil War. You could see that in if you want to draw, you talk about digital technology. It's the repercussions of so many people having so much information. It's almost as if a collective schizophrenia has taken hold of many of the developed world's populations, where suddenly everybody has the answers, but no one. So no one's really looking to be led, because
right.
Everybody thinks they're their own leader in a matter of way that even though they're getting punked. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it does. It does.
What'll happen is the reaction will be to kind of regress into a somewhat of a totalitarian philosophy, where the people can't make decisions for themselves, so we'll make decisions for them. And some people actually want that, because they just can't be bothered.
I think, nowadays, I think most people want that, but they have to be bothered. It's getting to the point, like you said, when people start screaming about how hungry they are, or about how little money they have, or how they don't have the luxuries they used to have, these things, like you said, that were given to them, that's when they start getting pissed off. Do you think that these demonstrations, these physical demonstrations of people showing up, are going to help, or going to hurt? Do you think it's just pissing into the wind? What do you think about that?
It depends who's there. If it's professional protesters, it's not going to do anything, because no one takes those people seriously. Let's just be honest about it. If it's a youth-driven, small, Battle of Seattle type thing, where a bunch of college kids show up with gas masks, no one's really going to give a damn, because no one takes that seriously, because that's sort of what they just do. If it turns out that their parents start coming with them, that's when people will start taking it seriously.
Right. When it gets beyond just the rebellious generation, the younger generation, it gets into the all the people, the real taxpayers.
Usually, revolutions, whether they're violent or not violent, always start with the people who kind of are ahead of the curve in whatever the cause is, and that's usually kind of an intelligentsia that's surrounded by a small group of people, and then people interpret things differently. If as many people as there are that many opinions. If mom and pop and Republicans and Democrats and all things in between, and people from the Midwest and people from North, South, and all points in between start showing up at their local, Goldman Sachs office, and pestering them, then it'll be interpreted in a different way altogether.
Sounds like that's what we need to do. Sounds like that's what people that live right there at least need to do. But
but then you have to ask yourself, what do you do afterwards? That's never the question that people ask themselves. Whilst in the middle of throwing a brick through the window, is what am I going to replace this window with?
Well, yeah. When you said it earlier, you said everyone thinks they have all the answers, but I think that's definitely the illusion. I think if anything, we just have a lot more questions. With rhetorical answers. It's just never ending right now. And I guess it would take something monumental to change everyone's mind and make them look another direction all at once. And when that happens, well, let me digress a little bit. Getting into these little situations, these little fires right now, I just want to, this is more of a blanket question, but going back in time to the American Revolution, the Constitution, I'm just curious as to what's your take on that? Are you one of those that thinks that they had a great idea and it got lost in translation and corrupted over the years? Or are you one of those that thinks Manifest Destiny was a bunch of horse shit to begin with, and millions of Native Americans have died? And I mean, I'm just curious as to where you think the origins of this country and do they stand up in time?
I think you can have both of those understandings, because I think that applies to just about any group of people. The people that founded this country had great ideas, but they certainly weren't saints.
Hell no, they weren't.
And the idea of saying, well, they just didn't understand back then, I'm sorry, I just don't buy that. They were smart men, and they were rich men, and there was also poor men and poor women, and that just you'll never hear about. Doesn't mean they're bad people, because they, moved west at the same time. The genocide of Native peoples have not only occurred in the United States, they've occurred in Australia, they've occurred in Europe, it's just decades ago.
Well, that's progress.
Yeah, sure. It just all depends how it pans out at the end. And,
exactly.
It's you gotta look at it in context of the philosophers of that time, of the 18th century. They had some grand ideas. Some of them were just philosophers, just thought that they were going to build a grand city on a hill, and it was going to be beautiful, and it was going to be as if they themselves were the architects of heaven on earth, and they honestly believed that. Other ones said, shit, heaven on earth, that's a good way to make a shitload of money.
Right.
And the Tea Party, which gets so much attention these days, that really wasn't about patriotism as much as it was about a bunch of pissed off businessmen.
That's the way I see it too.
And these were the Bill Gates of their day. These were the movers and shakers, and they didn't like having to pay taxes because it was a foreign body. Then it became a nationalist thing, and we saw what happened. And that's all well and good, but let's not try to put halos around these guys' heads as if the fate of America was their number one concern. It was whether or not they're going to be able to buy another pewter plate for their wife.
Right. Well, they were trying to, the whole idea of separating church and state was definitely to make themselves more well off. And
that's true, but also I think if you consider what England and the church were so in bed together that it left a really bad taste in a lot of people's mouths for generation and generation. And I think you can't completely divorce those things. They're tied in with one another. And who's to say? You can't get into the mind of a living man. You're certainly not going to get into the mind of a dead one.
No, not even with all their writings and manuscripts and everything they put together. There's no way we can really know. But I think it was always flawed. I think every system's going to be flawed. Human beings are flawed, in my opinion. I don't think there's really any way to make that utopia. I don't know what it is about us, but I feel like we're, I don't know if you agree with this, but Gene Roddenberry had it right. We're the Klingons. That's the way I feel about humanity in general.
There's sometimes I feel the same way, but at the same time, I do not want to have a fatalistic attitude that there's nothing to be done for it.
I think there's something to be done, but I think it's it's a pendulum, and it just constantly goes back and forth. The solution, and then there's another problem, and the solution. That's just the way it works.
Well, I'm
a happy person. I have a family. I have a really wonderful family and a wonderful life, but just humanity in general just really, really disgusts me. That doesn't mean people and their personalities or their personal lives. That means everything as a whole. It's like a petri dish, and it's just always getting corrupted.
Well, I think and this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, is, and I'm going to change the subject on you slightly.
Go ahead.
The idea of conspiracy theory, for years and years was always on the fringe because a lot of people didn't have access to it. You had to go to conferences with a bunch of weirdos. And
I've been there.
Well, I've been there too, and it was some of the most memorable experiences of my life. But when you had the internet, all of a sudden everybody had access to this, and it's become much more of a popular pastime. And one of the problems with it is, I think, a very fundamental aspect of the human psyche is our ability to see patterns, whether they're real or imagined, in chaos. And it goes back to the beginnings of human history, when we saw patterns in the tracks of predators in the mud, or patterns in bird calls, or patterns in the weather, or patterns in the stars, and patterns in time, patterns in life. And it was because of our ability to see the pattern and then predict what happens next. That's why we were so damn successful, or one of the reasons. We still have this in us, and now we try to apply the same thing to information. And we imagine a lot of these patterns. And some people with agendas will say, well, this group and this group did this and this and this, and that's what's causing this. The Nazis had a field day with that kind of approach. And now a lot of us can fall prey to other people's ideas of what they see. And I'm not saying that conspiracy theories are bullshit. It's just that you can all of a sudden become awash in this tsunami of information, and your fear response is to wonder, how can I make sense of this? And I don't think any of us can.
Not with our limited information and scope of understanding, no.
That's absolutely true. And we try to filter it as best we can, sometimes either by completely ignoring it or by deciding that there's a pattern to it. Just the other day, there was a guy yelling at Obama, telling him he's the Antichrist, and that's him wanting to see a pattern and then predict what will happen next because he's scared shitless. Probably for his own reasons. I couldn't tell you what. So I think that we can't underestimate the effect that all this information is having on people around the world. I think it's freaking us the fuck out.
It is. Well, we were never meant to have this much information, were we? I mean, it's trying to make sense of the senseless. A lot of it is. I mean, when I look at the conspiracies, because obviously I'm one of those. You've been one of those in your life, and a great majority of it probably is bullshit. And what's real and what's not, who's to say? But if it really rings your bell, you got to follow it, I guess. And there's so much to point fingers at these days, Neil. I mean, everywhere we turn right now, it must be some sort of conspiracy to constrict us down this way. Get people to this lowest level. I mean, there's just so little. Well, I don't know what the word. I don't want to say hope, but there's just such little opportunity like there used to be. And it just seems like it's all drying up. And it really seems money-based, power-based is more relevant. I don't think money has as much to do with it because that's pretty much an illusion. I think money is, alchemy. I mean, it's always been kind of magic and illusion. It doesn't really exist, the way I see it. I've never really bought into that idea. And all this thing about it, using a gold-based economy again, that's just crazy talk. It's not possible.
I would imagine that a lot of the idea of hopelessness stems from a kind of claustrophobia, because it wasn't that long ago where most of us considered, going out of state as being somewhat an adventure.
It's insane.
Yeah. Now, everybody's up at everybody's grill. You can circumnavigate the globe in a day. And we understand, I think it's dawning on everybody that we all live on this earth and it's a closed system. And there's a finite amount of everything. There's no magic machine that just churns out everything that we need in perpetuity. So some of us are scared that the ledger will start going red in our lifetime. If it hasn't already, it will be scared for our children that it goes red then. If you look at a population that's increasing with a finite amount of resources, the outcomes are not good. They're always, it's either war or pestilence or some kind of God in the machine to come down and reduce demand, which means reducing the population.
Right.
Some people would imagine that there are people that will actually engineer that. Maybe there are. I don't know. I would rather kind of indulge myself in thinking, how do we increase our ability to expand by getting more elbow room outside of this earth? That sounds so outlandish.
Not to me, Neil. I know right where you're going. I see it coming light years away.
Oh, good. Well, to me that's hope. And people get, when you say that to a lot of people, they laugh at you like, "Oh, who's this space cadet?" I don't think it's that out of reach. Yeah, a lot of our technology is pretty crude. Jets are very crude. Our space program is ridiculously crude.
Oh, no, I think that's, this would come down to what we would call a conspiracy or just withholding information, but I believe we're far, far beyond that and have been for a long, long time. And I don't think NASA has been anything more than a ginormous smokescreen and a waste of money. The rockets. Come on, rockets. Yeah. We haven't gotten beyond rockets yet.
The Chinese were doing that 600 years ago.
Yeah, well, they weren't putting a Chinaman on the rocket at that time, but for sure, it's archaic compared to what we must have, and we could sit here and be coy and pretend we haven't read and seen different things, and I don't know about your feelings about it, but I'll just put it out there. Our space program is far beyond that. I think we've been here and there and everywhere, not maybe everywhere, but we've been outside of our little moon area, and there's got to be people that have gone beyond that, and it has been on a freaking rocket ship. So the question comes: isn't it the same thing as the Americans or the Spaniards or anybody else? I should say the English or the Spaniards or anybody who's gone into another continent over the sea of water, and then we show up and then we're there and then we bring disease and everything else. If humans feel they must go outwards like that, it's pretty much going to be the same invasion to whoever we head towards.
Sure, that's one scenario.
They're going to they're not going to give us catering in an open bar as soon as we show up to some other planet.
This is true. I would hazard a guess that guess is probably just not even the right word. That if anything is holding us back, it's because we're probably not being allowed into the Galactic Social Club.
I totally agree with that too. Why would you allow us into it? We haven't proven that we can even deal with ourselves. Why would we be able to go out there and deal with it?
If you're enjoying a nice dinner at home, and there's people next door having a kegger, and someone knocks on your door and asks if they can use your toilet, you're going to say no. And you could draw an analogy to the galaxy, and just to back it up, back a little bit. The idea that we're alone in the universe, I think, is completely arrogant and ethnocentric to no end. If there are other intelligences who are aware of us already, then they're certainly more developed than we are, both technologically and
spiritually.
And spiritually, by correlation, intellectually, and all things that make up for an intelligent civilization. And they can see us for what we are. Maybe we're an anomaly, or maybe we're just like them 1,000 to 10,000 years prior. Baby, this is a test of our viability as a species. If you can get past, X amount of years without using up what's been given to you, then sure, welcome to the club. Otherwise, your planet gets wiped clean, and then another microorganism steps up, and they start the process over again. I think science fiction is a pretty healthy exercise to indulge in, because it gives you a humble way to kind of explore larger pictures without, losing your mind.
You could still be pretending that it's pretend. Gene Roddenberry, I used him earlier. I think he was really, his resources, everything he did, the people he used as his, creative consultants and everything like that. I mean, that was just an ingenious concept. And I'm not exactly sure. Have you ever watched Battlestar Galactica, the newer one?
I started to, and I stopped just because I'm terrible at keeping up with any kind of program series.
It's, the payoff is it's pretty good. And I don't want to tell you everything, if you ever go back to it, but, essentially it's, things repeat themselves. I believe that any and all things are possible when it comes to this outward life. It's kind of a, I know very little about quantum physics, but, from what I gather, it's anything and everything is possible. And, we could be talking about, the past, the future, terrestrial, dimensional. It's all relevant. You shouldn't really turn the mind off and to the fact that it's all happening at once and it overlaps. So, and just so you know, you can say anything you want here. This is not one of those things where you got to feel like you have to hold back that thing you want to say. All right?
Oh, no, don't worry, I won't.
Okay, good. Yeah, because sometimes we do these interviews and you get a list of interviews and you get this fucking schmuck on, you don't know who you're going to talk to on the other end of the thing and what they're into. And, this show is about an open mind. We only have questions.
Interviews aren't really interviews, they're just conversations.
That's what we're having here. We're just having a conversation. And believe me, nobody's listening. Anyway, well, I was going to go backwards a little bit, and we started getting into this whole thing about conspiracy. But since we did mention conspiracy, how do you feel about Alex Jones? I know I actually listened to the show you did with him. If you've done a couple, I only know about one.
No, I only did that one. I haven't listened to Alex Jones in quite some time. My feelings regarding that is kind of what I said earlier, and I had a bit of an epiphany after Obama was elected. Prior to that, when Bush was in office, all my left-leaning friends were always saying, "Oh, Dad, you listen to Alex Jones. You listen to Alex Jones. He's got some real shit to talk about." And then Obama got elected, and all my right-leaning friends said, "Oh, you listen to Alex Jones. He's telling the truth." And it was like, okay, well, everybody's just finding what they're looking for, or we're just playing both sides of the fence, or the kind of umbrella argument that whether it's one political party or the other, it doesn't matter. It just kind of sucked the air out for me. And I think there's, like most conspiracy personalities or shows. There's some really cool and interesting stuff in there, but it's also really hard to sort through the nonsense. That's why I was always a big fan of Art Bell, because when there was nonsense, you could tell. When the guy who would call up and say, "I'm a werewolf," and Art Bell would kind of
Saturday nights.
Yeah, it was fun. But he would also get serious, and I think Alex Jones did something really cool when he went to Bohemian Grove.
Oh, that was great.
I think that was. I'd like to hear more about that, because maybe there's nothing else to it, but I thought that was just amazing.
Well, there's something right there. There's some sort of relevancy to conspiracy. I mean, you get all those people in one place at one time.
They're certainly not doing it because they're trying to catch up on old times. You don't just have a party like that just for shits and giggles.
Yeah, and what they're doing when they're there is, hey, it's not my kind of party, but someone likes it.
No.
It's pretty strange. I do know. We actually, my singer for my rock band, Spiral Arms, him and I knew a guy whose uncle got recruited for that. And it was before it actually Grove and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, dude. I was pretty aware of what it was going to turn into. And he said he just in passing mentioned it to his uncle that I had said something about it, and he said his uncle just gave the steel stare. Yeah. What do you know? It's like, okay, well, if nothing's a matter and there's absolutely no problem, no one gives a shit when you talk about it, but they do tend to get a little bit worked up. I think Harry was his name, Shearer? Is it Harry Shearer? Yeah, is that his name, Harry?
Yeah.
Harry Shearer, yeah. He just said it's a bunch of grown men blowing off steam.
You got one way of putting it.
Yeah. Blowing off something.
It's and going back to Alex Jones, the 9/11 was an inside job. I think definitely deserved the questions that were asked. Deserved to be asked.
They still do. But look what it did to Charlie Sheen. You know what I mean? Look what it did to that guy. Sure, the cocaine and strippers and everything, but he was. I believe Charlie was actually onto something, and it helped drive him into a more insane and sheltered place. That broke him. That really broke him. Not like I really give a shit about Charlie Sheen that much, but I see a correlation there.
Wait. I don't understand what you mean when you say what broke him.
Remember Charlie Sheen was one of the biggest fighters for truth about 9/11. Actually got an interview with Barack Obama about it. And Barack was being nothing but coy about the entire thing. I'm going to get right to the bottom of that. Oh, yeah. Laundry list of good questions. And Charlie Sheen got really close to it all. And then absolutely nothing happened with it except for people calling him a kook. And, coke and strippers ruins all credibility. Come on. You had some good questions.
Yeah, it's like the galactic thing. Like once you start asking questions like that, it's much easier to dismiss somebody than it is to have a conversation. But the thing that kind of left that taste in my mouth is instead of it's a slippery slope, because all you have to do is look at Al Jazeera, and all that is one giant conspiracy webpage. And it's 9/11 was the Israelis, and it fits into the pattern they want to see, and it started just kind of freaking me out, because it started becoming a blame game. Like who would be the likely party to do this? I don't think anyone really knows the answer to that. You just have to look at facts, and sometimes people don't want to admit when facts don't add up. Jury's out for me. Other than I believe, two planes crashing these planes, and the people that were involved are the people that committed it. I think we don't want to believe that these guys did it because it's how could it be so simple? But people put their minds to doing something, they'll do it.
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah, but no one's going to deny two planes hit those buildings. But how do you get an entire country to stand down militarily for the entire period that this thing happened? That's where all the questions start for me. And then, of course, building number 7 is a huge question for me personally.
Well, that's my point I was trying to make. In Al Jazeera, there are people who believe that the plane thing that actually never occurred. No plane ever did anything. Yeah, it was all a figment of everybody's imagination.
Well, that's crazy talk.
The thing that still sticks in my mind, if anything, and I haven't really honestly combed over everything that was presented then. At the Pentagon, which was the closest to me, the tarps of these big giant kind of blue box-like things that these guys were carrying over their shoulders like it weighed 8 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
That to me, they certainly weren't bodies. That to me sent my alarm bells going. It was just so peculiar. Maybe there's a rational answer for it, but until I get that, I'm still going to be scratching my head.
Well, I'm sure you're similar to anybody who's got common sense who asks a lot of questions. There's just a never-ending parade of questions to ask about this thing, like, how does a plane hit, and there's no sign of any wings, except for the stabilizer. What happens in this giant hole in the middle of Pennsylvania? There's absolutely no wreckage there, but yet it's thrown out for miles beyond where it said even crashed. It goes on and on. But getting back to Alex, and just the last thing I say, in my opinion, and I've never talked to Alex. I would like to actually speak to him one day. I know he uses one of our songs as bumper music, which is no one's paid me for that, but that's cool. But I think he's kind of turned into a self-serving parody of himself. I mean, it's become watered down with just the self-important anger. And that's a shame, because I do think he has great information. But he got a little too big for himself, in my opinion.
Well, going to what you're saying, it's well, you always got to have fear if you're going to sell it. And if something's good, that's not why people are listening. You can't say somebody did a good job. The word fearmonger comes to mind. When you look at a website that sells crisis gardens, a crisis garden isn't going to feed you for a fucking week.
No.
You got to have a farm, and no one's going to just go out and buy a farm unless they're really freaked the fuck out. And it's kind of easy to scare the shit out of people for $1. And I think he does a good job of walking that line. Sometimes it's hard to understand where he's coming from. But like I said, I haven't listened to him in a while.
Yeah, I would hate to think that it's all about money, but I'm sure it's not. It's littered with real information, I'm sure, and concerns, but it's just turned into, like you said, a crisis garden. An old missile silo can be your new bomb shelter home, and it's just an endless amount of things like that too. So that waters it down to me. It takes a little bit of the credibility out. That's enough.
I think he's, he probably really believes most of what he's got to say, but at the same time, you got to wonder if truth is really a motivation, or do you have to kind of cherry pick what you present in order to create the mood that people want to listen to it? That's all. I'm not saying he's a liar. It's just I have much more skepticism than I used to.
As we should, I mean, I try to keep the fine line of still being skeptical, but at the same time not losing, my questioning of authority. That when you look at what happened to the people in the '60s and how hard they fought, and they've been castrized since then. There's just castrated and completely. Their balls are smashed into powder. They have no fight. Those people, and that's a shame to see. Because I mean, there was a goal, there was something they were going for in those days, and I look at that generation, it's gone.
Draw an analogy that in the 60s they sabotaged it with drugs, and that sucked the life out of it for them. And it's easy to get emotional about these things because you're talking about fear, you're talking about death, you're talking about power or powerlessness. And when you become emotional, that's when you stop being rational. And when you stop being rational, you can be easily manipulated. So I think it's important to always try to be, I say, I'm not a scientist by any stretch of the imagination, but try to be as cool about it and as clinical about it as you can. So when the time comes that you do become emotional about it, you're very focused and not just throwing shit over the fence to see where it lands.
Which, yeah, most of us are guilty of doing time and again. So let's jump into some lyrics, brother. I know you got to go pretty soon here, and I had a few songs I'd chosen. I just wanted to kind of ask you, and one of the funnest ones for me, one of the lightest ones, I think pretty much summed you up pretty good. It was lyrics to "Raised by Horses."
Mm-hmm.
I loved that song the first time I heard that album. I was like, well, see, there he is. This is the guy right here, you know. And could you explain to me a little bit about it? Was that a real record company moment?
It was. There was nothing terrible about the dinner. We went out with some people, and I think it was folks with Atlantic, and I don't even remember the conversation. It was of course it was in Manhattan, and I remember I was just joking around with JP, and I said it was just Josh with me, and whatever I said to him, he said to me, "Well, at least I wasn't raised by horses," and we just kind of started busting up about it, and because I associated that line with the dinner, that's how that song kind of started. It's not any particular one event. It's sort of like represents a collection of ridiculous conversations with corporate music industry people.
Doing the tap dance on the eggplant parmesan.
Yeah, it was an Italian dinner. That much is accurate.
It was an Italian dinner.
Yes, it was.
And it was eggplant.
I might have made that up.
That's great. That's great. I know that Bill had asked me to ask you about Electric Worry and kind of what you were trying to convey in that song.
Well, a good portion of the lyrics are written by Fred McDowell, Mississippi Fred McDowell, and the opening lines, like "You Made Me Weep," and the rest were kind of came real quick with a just a very typical blues complaint about just being broke.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when you get so broke, it's almost liberating. Some of the most unhappy people I know have shitloads of money, and some of the most happy people I know, are cutting out coupons just to get by. I'm not saying that being broke is a good thing and you should strive for it, but when you don't own anything, you're not tied down physically, and you can keep moving. So perhaps it's a bit of a romanticizing the hobo's lifestyle, without all the terrible things that go along with it. So that's sort of, at least in general, what I was thinking about the rest of the lyrics.
So the lines, you can have your riches, all the gold you saved, 'cause ain't room for one thing in everybody's grave. That sums it up just fine right there, huh?
Yeah, I think so. Of course, you always want to provide for your family if you got one, but for me, life is about being good to other people, or at least doing your damnedest to try to do good. That's what people remember. That in a way is immortality, because if you pay that forward, to use an overused expression, it never goes away. Whereas paper money, I mean, that's just dust in the wind, to use another overused phrase.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's just an illusion in the first place. Money doesn't even exist. So I know we got to hurry up here. A couple more. I just want to get 100011. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, that was a completely kind of random series of numbers. Nothing too particular about it. I learned that there are a lot of people who are fans of binary, code that have asked me what that means. And I just like the rhythm of it. The rest of the song is just sort of a montage of kind of dystopian paranoia about technology gone awry.
That's what I was talking about when I started this whole thing with you. Just that stream of unconsciousness. Keep doing that. That's perfect.
Well, that's the funnest way. When it happens that way, it's usually overthinking something is never the right way when it comes to art. You just kind of have to indulge yourself in some automatic writing if the spirit's moving you.
All right, one last one. Mice and Gods.
Similar thing. Technology in all its trappings can will someday end, and it's a great responsibility. I haven't actually sang the song quite some time, so I'm sitting here trying to remember to run the teleprompter in my mind. But,
Silver Woman on Omni Magazine. They got the future precisely laid out as I need.
Yeah, that was. I used to get Omni Magazine when I was a kid, and it had a very kind of hopeful outlook on the future, which isn't a bad thing. But I always loved the covers with the airbrush, robot chicks.
Yeah, I
still do.
I seem to remember that magazine being in my science classes. Like one of my teachers had all those.
It was a Playboy publication, so they knew what they were doing.
Is that right?
Yeah, that was a Hefner project.
Oh, okay. It all comes back to Hef. Well, I can say it was a pleasure, man. I want to do this again, if at all possible.
Yeah, sure. Just talk to Freeman and we can set it up. Sorry, I have to cut it off, but looks like dinner's about ready.
No problem. I hear the family back there. I got one of my own. Yeah, I'll try to. And as far as if I give him my email address or vice versa, we can communicate that way. That'd be great.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, we'll keep it simple, man. And I definitely.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Please, no, thank you, brother. That was definitely a lot of fun, and I look forward to talking to you again, man.
We'll do it again.